Okay, I bought these 4-piece sets. There's a bent straw, straight straw, and a straw cleaner, and these skinny tumblers, 20 ounce, black, super simple, stainless steel, and I'm going to be measuring it to show you the length of it and the circumference around so that I could show you how I designed my design to go onto it. And today we're going to be using the Cricut to cut out a stencil to go on our tumbler to essentially laser engrave the tumbler. So we're going to be removing that black coat off the top, and we're going to get down to that stainless steel material, and it's just going to leave a nice clean finish, and you're going to love the finished product. It's super simple, super easy instructions to follow. Let's get right into it. So I've already designed this yesterday, so there it is on my tablet. I'm going to take this just to get a clean straight line on at least one side, and I'm going to measure it to make sure that it's at least the length of the name that I'm cutting out, about a 1/2 inch longer actually. So we're going to just make a straight line there, and perfect. So I'm going to cut off that excess on the end as well, because I'm not going to need it, and it's just going to end up getting in the way, and I could use it later for a small little project or whatever. Here I'm using my light grip mat, and it's my first time using this one. This is a brand new one, so pretty excited about that. Here I am cutting off that excess that I'm not going to need. And here I'm going to ungroup it. I had grouped it prior, but it was just not sufficient. It was taking up too much of the mat, so I want to get them a little bit closer, which I do end up regretting later, but I'm going to highlight them and move it just, to get it where it's accurate for me. And then I'm going to group them back together. And what I'm doing here is looking at the number on the mat that's on the screen of my tablet, because you can see the numbers there. You can't see them because it's so far away and it's such a small screen, but I'm just eyeballing it, making sure that my piece is big enough and it's going to be sufficient for the piece that I cut. I want to make sure that I get the whole logo on there. And I'm just making sure that everything lines up perfectly to how the stencil is on the screen of the tablet, and readjusting it here on my light grip mat. And I'm gonna send make it, and waiting on it to connect with my Bluetooth on my Cricut Maker. And then I initially selected the wrong material, so I ended up having to go back and change that, which is no big deal. And there are several different materials to choose from, but this is just a permanent vinyl that I'm using, so I'm just gonna select the vinyl, and then I'm gonna put it on a little bit firmer pressure for my blade to cut through. Okay, once I get everything like I need it, line it up, hit my arrow button, let it read my material, and then I realized that I did not scoop my table away from the wall. So when it sends it back, it's gonna hit the wall. So I gotta move the table. And the corner of my vinyl came up, which is no big deal. I reached in there and kind of pressed it back down. It was just the one corner. And it let it go. It cuts super fast. It's sufficient for so many different projects, but I'm really excited about this new project. This is a gift that I'm making for a dear friend of mine who is just starting out on her podcast doing what God has called her to do, and it's a birthday gift for her, along with a, hey, you're relaunching your brand. And she had initially started doing her podcast 2 years ago, and she took a break because it was just, there was a lot of things going on, and she took a break for a little while, but she's relaunching, and I'm super excited for her, and I know that God's got big things for her, so this is kind of my tribute to that for her, and happy birthday at the same time. So 2 birds, 1 stone. Super proud of her. Here I'm cutting in between my 2 designs, the name and the logo of her podcast, and I'm going to start weeding out the lettering so that it will be a stencil to remove. That's what's going to come off of the cup. And there are some little bitty pieces in there, and I fought with them trying to make sure they stayed on, because I want it to look right. So pay attention to detail whenever you're making something. Take pride in your work. It's the best advice I could give. And this is my transfer tape, and I'm gonna take my squeegee and I'm going to press into it really well to make sure that all those little pieces come up. And here I'm going to eyeball where my center is 4, because it's 8 inches long, and I already know where my center line is, and I'm just lining that up with my finger, and that's my center of my stencil. It just, I cut it that big because I intend to reuse that transferred tape for the next stencil that I'm taking up for the podcast logo. So pressing in really good to make sure that everything transfers over to the cup itself. And because I'm going to reuse this transfer tape, I'm going to go right into weeding the other stencil and getting it ready so that whenever I take my transfer tape up, it can just quickly transfer right over to the next stencil to come up. And this is my first time doing a laser stenciling with these materials, and I am just super excited with how it turned out. It looks so good, guys. There's my stencil and all the little dots I pulled off. Okay, so we're going to be taking that transfer tape off, move it on over. And there's some small pieces there too, so I'm making sure I press in really good, especially since I'm reusing it. And this is my makeshift. Keep it still. And after I pull this off, I am not going to tell you how many times I put it on and took it off. But this first time I take it off because I need to cut that edge off because it's just too long and it's going to go over into my other stencil. So I need to clean that edge up because it's running long ways. Well, width-wise, it's longer. And there I just, from my widest point to my widest point, measured around and found my center, and then just kind of give myself a couple little dots with some wax chalk so that I could line up. That's my center. And then I'm going to squeegee that down real good to make sure everything transfers over real cleanly. And it did pretty well. Nothing came up with the transfer tape, so I was pretty proud on both of them. And I'm going to take the time to make sure that I push out all the air pockets that are in the stencil from the transfer over. And I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to make sure that I push all the air pockets out of her name as well. And then we're going to take painter's tape and we're just going to tape off all those edges to make sure that we just have no runoff in case if any of the stripper that we're using runs down the cup. It won't damage the product that powder coats it. Just make sure that your lines are clean. In my opinion, it's just, better safe than sorry, for sure. And initially, I probably should have made sure that I had extra vinyl at the top and bottom of my stencil, of her name specifically, because the tape was super close to the stenciling that I was doing, but I was able to have a clean surface of, just the stencil, but it was very carefully placed and very, very close to the edge, and I would have felt better had there been more vinyl. So if you're gonna do this, just try to make sure that you have plenty of space between the edge and your stencil where it starts. Alright, and here we have this citrus strip, and I got one of these wee yogurt jars, and I'm just gonna pour some into it so that I could dip my sponge brush down into the cup. You don't need much. I'm only doing the 1 cup, so I don't really need an excessive amount. Just cleaning up my edge and recap it because I would have knocked it over had I not recapped it. And clean up that edge there because I just don't want to accidentally stick my hand in it. It's safe, but I don't want to burn myself with the chemicals. So here, you're just going to make sure when you're putting it on, it's going to look like I'm smearing it around, but it's just really thick. And so what I'm doing is I'm just trying to make sure that there's a thick layer across the whole stencil. So I'm scooping it up and I'm dabbing it on. And I'm just coating that whole stencil opening and making sure that it's nice thick layer across the whole thing. We're going to let that sit for about 30 minutes. Honestly, I let it sit for about 35. And here I'm checking it with my weeding tool, and you can see the black coming up. So I'm super excited. I'm going to take it to the sink and flip it over and start on the other side. Okay, here we have the other side, and I'm just going to take the rest of this in this jar and just really coat it on there very well and thick, so that for one, I don't feel like I'm wasting any product, and for two, just because you can't go wrong making sure that it's got a good coating on it. And just to let you know, whenever I took it to the sink and rinsed it off, I was using a cleaning rag that I probably shouldn't have used because the black got stuck all inside of it, but I did have to come back and wipe it down with a paper towel really good, and it helped knock some of it off. And it looks, whenever you do it this way, it looks like it's gonna have really rough lines. So I waited until I did this side, coated it really well, waited another 35 minutes and let it sit and do its magic, get all that coating off of there. You're gonna get to see the shot of this too, and when I show you the shot of this one after it's set for 35 minutes, guys, like, you could see it bubbling under there. You could see it actually pulling it up. It's pretty awesome. See at the top here, you kind of see it bubbling. It's not smooth anymore. That's how you know it's pulling it up. But just for satisfaction purposes, we're gonna take that weeding tool and we're just gonna go ahead and scratch some of that just so we can see it coming up, because it's great. Alright, so I'm going to take it to the sink and clean it off as well. And once I wiped it off, I took all my stenciling off, and I took a scrub daddy and I scrubbed both sides of it and got all the stuff off of it that was just kind of making it look like it wasn't clean lines, and it really cleaned the lines up. It looks amazing. I am super proud of this. She loved it. She was giggling and squealing like a little girl. So when